All right, guys. Today we're going to talk about rectangles, rhombi, and squares. Oh my. And all of these items are parallelograms. They have the same characteristics of them. So that's why you see the first thing on this page as being a parallelogram, because we're going to review those characteristics, and those qualify also for rectangles, rhombi, and squares. What is a rhombi, you ask? It is plural for a rhombus. All right, now, I like to use multiple colors, so I've got my little map pencils, markers, pencil, and pen. If you want to go around and collect these items, highlighters, whatever you need, stealing from your little brother or sister, go right ahead and do that, because I like to color coordinate these types of notes. All right, so we're going to start off with drawing, color coding this parallelogram with these different characteristics here. The first one, both pair of opposite sides are parallel. All right, so we're going to mark them as parallel. The top and bottom sides, I'm going to use green, and I'm going to give them one arrow. The left and right sides, I'm going to use orange, and I'm going to use 2 arrows. Okay, remember you want to use a different number for sides that are not parallel. These are parallel to each other, so we use the same number of arrows. These are parallel to each other, so we use the same number of arrows for those. All right, so we'll check that one off. The next one, both pair of opposite sides are congruent. All right, I've got orange in my hand, so I'm going to go ahead and do this side. This side here is congruent. I'm going to make the little markings. I'm going to put 2 little marks there to show the congruent symbol with this side over here. My paper's moving around, making it messy. All right, top and bottom are congruent. Mark it green. Get 1 little congruent mark. Down at the bottom, 1 little congruent mark. Check that one off. All right, the third item, both pair of opposite angles are congruent. All right, so I'm going to just continue with orange and green as my theme, and I'm going to make this angle, this one's obtuse, so let's give it an obtuse degree. I'm going to make up 130 degrees. I have no idea, that just sounded like a good number. And this one, opposite it, is also going to be 130 degrees. All right, now these here have to be congruent, but that leads us into the next item. What should these 2 angles be? Well, they are consecutive to the obtuse angles, so they are supplementary. They are your consecutive interior angles are supplementary. So therefore, this angle should be 50, because 50 plus 130 is 180. 50 plus 130 equals 180. That's what we mean by supplementary, and consecutive, one right after the other. So I'm going to make my congruent markings over here and give it a 50-degree angle. Voila. All right, so check, check. We've done all 4 of those items. So I'm going to scooch on down, look at the next one. All right, ooh, we've got some diagonals written in this one. And it says the diagonals bisect each other. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little point right here in the center. And this little point would be considered a midpoint, because each one of these segments is congruent to the other. That's what we mean by bisecting. So I'm going to use green right here. This part is congruent with this part. I'm going to give it the congruent symbols. I'm going to give them both 2 little dashes. And this diagonal here, this segment, is congruent to this segment right here. I'm going to give those 2 little congruent marks. All right. And then let's go ahead and give the diagonals a length of measure. All right. Let's make this segment 7. So therefore this segment is 7. And on the longer diagonal, we'll make that one 10. And this one 10 as well. Okay. Then the second part says all pairs of alternate interior angles are congruent. Ooh, blast from the past. That's back in chapter 3. Alternate interior angles. Well, if you remember, when you have parallel lines that are cut by a transversal, this green one is a transversal, or this orange one's a transversal. Alternate interior angles are congruent. So what we have here is this angle right here is congruent with this angle down here. So we'll color that in a little bit just to make sure you can see it, that those are congruent. And then this angle right here is congruent with this angle here. Because here's your parallel lines, here's your transversal that connects with both parallel lines, and so each one of these angles is going to be congruent here, here, and here. Well, we also have a set of parallel lines over here, this one and this one. All right. Well, the transversals, or the diagonals, intersect with those as well. And so we have these angles right here, which are alternate interior. So I'm going to get a different color. This angle here is congruent with this angle here. Okay. And last but not least, this angle over here, here's your transversal, okay? And it connects with these parallel lines. So where the parallel lines touch that transversal, this is where our alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay? Now, some things to think about, okay? You might be given little tidbits of information here, such as this angle right here is 35 degrees. If that's the case, then you know that this angle here is also 35 degrees. Then I might say, alrighty, this angle here is 20 degrees. Then you would know, oh, well then this angle up here is 20 degrees. And then this angle, this orange one, is 85 degrees. Then this orange angle here is 85 degrees. Now, looking at this information, these two angles together add up to 120 degrees. So therefore, these two angles have to add up to 60 degrees, because 60 plus 120 is 180. Well, I don't know what this angle is, but this one's 20. Together they have to equal 60, so the missing angle here is 40 degrees. Alright, so those are some thought process you might have to use in problem solving when you start to use your textbook. Alright, second page. Now we're getting into the rectangles. Alright, y'all know what a rectangle is. You've seen it before, you've drawn it, but now we've got some extra characteristics of it. Okay. The first thing it says is all properties of parallelograms. What that means is everything you did here applies right here. Everything. Opposite sides are parallel and congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. Consecutive interior angles are supplementary. Diagonals bisect each other. All of this is true. However, we've got some extra properties as well. Okay, because we know in a rectangle we also have right angles. So let's go ahead and mark our angles as right angles. Each corner. And that fits the characteristics of a parallelogram. Opposite angles are congruent. Consecutive angles are supplementary. So there you go. All right, and let's go ahead and add in all the other things as well. These, the top and bottom sides, are congruent and parallel. Our other opposite sides, the left and right, are congruent and parallel. Okay? Let's see. Did I leave anything out? Nope, we got it all there. We can go ahead and write, though, here that 90 plus 90 equals 180, so that we can see that that's your consecutive interior angle property there. All right, now down at the bottom, here we go. Here's our rectangle with diagonals. Again, all properties of parallelograms. However, in a rectangle, since it's not slanted like a parallelogram, your diagonals are also congruent. So we got to make note of that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and color code these. I'm going to put like the midpoint in right here. And then this portion of the diagonal is congruent to this one. And I'm going to use the same color because this portion is congruent to this one. And if our diagonals are the same length, then when they bisect each other, each one of these segments is the same length. Okay, so that's really important to grasp there, that this segment is congruent to this segment is congruent to this segment. All right, so if this has a length of 20, this diagonal has a length of 20, and each one of these segments would be half of 20 because it bisects. And then alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay, let's go ahead and mark those. Why not? Here is an alternate interior angles because we need practice with that because we've probably forgotten it a little bit. Here we've got alternate interior angles, so I'm going to give those a different color. And let's go with black. Here we go. This one, this angle is alternate with this angle here. They're on opposite sides of the transversal. And what color did I not use? Let's go with, I'll just use purple here. This angle and this angle. Okay, so those are all of our characteristics with the parallelogram, plus noting that the diagonals are congruent. All right, now on to a rhombus. All right, now a rhombus is kind of like a parallelogram square type of thing. The thing about a rhombus, it's got all your properties of a parallelogram, but in this situation, all sides are congruent. So when we color code this one, we're going to use one color for all the sides. All right. So here we've got all sides congruent, like that of a square. All the same length. However, opposite sides are parallel, so I want to use a different color. I'll use black here for these to make that stand out a little bit. And then these two sides are parallel, so I'm going to, oh, I broke my pencil. Darn it. Let me use a different one. Here we go. Arrow, 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 arrow. All right, so we got the opposite sides are congruent and parallel thing going. And also to note, your opposite angles are congruent. So let's go with this angle right here is congruent with this angle right here. And both of those angles are obtuse. Let's give them about 110 degrees. Okay? And since our consecutive interior angles are supplementary, this angle would have to be 70 degrees, as well as the one opposite it. Okay, so that's why we have 70 plus 110 is 180 consecutive interior angles. All right, so there's your rhombus. Now, inside the rhombus, still all the properties of parallelograms. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. Now, a rhombus does not have congruent diagonals, but the diagonals are perpendicular. That's huge. And what do you know about perpendicular lines? They create right angles. So these angles inside here are going to be right angles. Also, each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. What does that mean? This diagonal bisects this angle, so these two angles here are congruent. All right, so we're going to have a lot of markings to put in here. So, let's give this a midpoint. Booyah, right there. Then we've got this segment is congruent to this segment. And this segment is congruent to this segment. And we want the most important note right here, right angles. Okay? So if this is a right angle, it is congruent to this one because they're supplementary. Same way with this one. This is also a right angle. And it's vertical. Oop, there's a word we haven't used in a while. These angles are vertical, and we know vertical angles are congruent as well. So all of them are right angles. Now, let's see. We need to show this little step here that each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. All right. So I'm going to use orange. So this big obtuse angle is split into two congruent angles. Well, up here I said that that angle was 110 degrees. If that's the case, then each one of these angles would be what? 55. So we've got a 55-degree angle here and a 55-degree angle here. And opposite angles are congruent, so booyah, over here, opposite angle, both of those are 55 degrees as well. Alrighty, now, up here at the top, these angles were 70 degrees, so what is each one of these going to be? You got it, they're going to be, what? 35, okay. 35 degrees here. 35 degrees here. Oh, don't forget the one opposite. So over here we got 35. And over here we've got 35 as well. Let's see. Can you think of anything else we need to put on there? Because I think we're good to go. All your properties of parallelograms, diagonals are perpendicular, meaning they create right angles, and the diagonals bisect opposite angles. There's a lot of memorization to this, folks. All right, that's it for a rhombus. Now, on to squares. Squares are kind of easy because they take on all the correct characteristics or all the properties of parallelogram, rectangles, and rhombi or rhombus. Okay, so let's get our colors on. Every side is congruent. We know that about a square. So I'm just going to put purple all the way around. And all of them have the same length. And we know opposite sides are parallel. So here's one parallel, dos parallel. Then we've got these sides here, left and right, are parallel. So I'm going to give them two triangles. And voila, over here as well. All right, how are we doing so far? Can you stop, take a break? Good, we're going to keep on going. Okay, so now we also know squares are like rectangles. Rectangles have all right angles. So there we go, we got to put in those right angles. Okay, and we know that those consecutive angles are supplementary. 90 plus 90 equals 180. Y'all getting tired of this yet? I'm going to drill it in you. Let's see. Have we missed anything? I do not think that we have. I think we're good for that part. All right. Now then, let's look at the inside with the diagonals. Again, all properties of parallelograms, rectangles, and rhombus. That should say rhombi. I need to fix that. All right, so let's go ahead and see, well, what is that? What are those characteristics? Well, we know that our diagonals bisect each other. And we know that our diagonals are congruent, same length. So each one of these segments is congruent to the other. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro. All right. Oh, and what else do we know? In a rhombus, the diagonals are perpendicular. So let's put our little perpendicular mark here to show we've got right angles. Ah, yes, and you cannot forget the fact that our diagonals bisect the angles. Now, here's a little catch. Because we know these angles are all right angles, booyah! What's the degree of each one of these? 45. 45. And this is a big thing to remember. It's a little trick. Students tend to get stumped with this one, and then they want to kick themselves afterwards when I remind them of it. Good test question, though. Okay. Let me think. Did we miss anything? I think we're all good. All right. Guys, that wraps it up. We have discussed rectangles, rhombi, and squares. Oh my! And you have all of the characteristics of each, as well as a refresher in parallelograms. See you later.